Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be doing the second video on the 6-cylinder engine. We're going to be removing the outer timing cover, also the timing chain and the inner cover. For this process I have already this engine out of I believe it was an XC70 2010. Unfortunately, I don't have one to show you what else needs to come off to get to this point. But if you have any questions, you can leave a comment. I will try to help you as much as I can. The main thing we need to do first is to remove the vacuum pump. It has two 10mm bolts I have already removed, and this comes off like that after removing the bolts. The drive pulley that drives the belt for the air compressor, the AC compressor, and the water pump, and in this case was also the power steering pump. To get this pulley off, we need to remove this cover, and in order to remove this cover you have to put a hole in the middle of the cover. You can see a little spot right here, right about there. Put a hole in it just like that and try to pop this cover. And it goes flying like that. This cover, of course, is going to have to be replaced. Unfortunately, Volvo uses a lot of these plugs that you have to put a hole in it in order to remove it, which is they have to be replaced. Now, in order to remove this, there's a bolt in there. Let me try to get a light. And this is going to be the first special tools we're going to use to remove that bolt. This is going to be the pulley holder. It's going to slide on here. And this is the T50, I believe, to loosen the bolt. Now we're going to hold the tool with a 15mm wrench, and then we're going to need an 8mm with a ratchet to break the bolt loose. This bolt is pretty tight. The easiest way I found to do it is to hold the wrench and the ratchet very close and try to kind of squeeze them together like that. It's going to be hard for me to do it one-handed. I just broke the bolt loose. Now I can remove the tool and remove the bolt. And that's what holds the pulley in place. Now to remove this pulley, there's really nothing holds it. So I just wiggle it up and down, side to side, shake it as you're pulling out, and it will come apart. Here it goes. Now we got to remove the drive belt idler pulley. That's a Torx 40, I believe. Now after removing this, we are ready to remove the bolts. See, these bolts go all the way around the cover, including this is a 10mm bolt and this 10mm bolt. These two also has to come out. Now there's also the coolant pipe is in the way. It goes in the bottom of the cover and it runs along the side, and there's two Torx 30 bolts hold the pipe in place. You would remove them. There's one goes here and one goes here. Once you remove these two bolts, you can slide the pipe out of the way, and that will give you access to these two bolts for the cover. I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to remove all these Torx 40 bolts all the way around, including these three. They go into these two spots. They almost don't fit in the other spots, but I'll try to be careful not to put them in there. The other thing, there's two different length bolts. This is the long bolts and there's the short bolts. If you look, the short bolts goes around the sides where it doesn't go into the head. It goes from the outer cover to the inner cover only. The long bolts, they go all the way to the cylinder head. Go through the outer, inner, and then it bolts into the cylinder head. These are where the long bolts go. All these are short bolts all the way to here, and then from here on you got the long bolts. So make sure to separate them, mark them if you have to know where each bolts go. I put them in styrofoam cups. And once you crack all these bolts loose, oil will start dripping from the bottom. And this cover comes off. This is the gasket that goes around here. You'd have to use a new one once you remove it. And this is the inside of the outer cover. The first thing you do once you remove this cover, remove this seal. Do not forget to remove the seal. And sometimes people forget to remove the seal. When they put the cover back on, they forget to line the cover up with the special tools, and they forget to change this seal. And there's a special tool for this, just for this seal to be reinstalled. Now once you get the outer cover removed out of the way, you'll be looking at the timing chain. This is a timing chain tensioner, and this is the camshaft intake camshaft pulley, and this is the exhaust. Just remember, the exhaust, it's just a smooth pulley. Intake, it's got this slot and it has the VVT adjustment to it, and it's only on the intake pulley. And also this slot for the vacuum pump. That's where this. So now to remove these cams, we have to remove these bolts, but first we have to loosen the chain. And to loosen the chain, we have to push this tensioner down. You don't have to take the tensioner off. You can just loosen the chain. What I do, this is like a spring, and it holds a little piece with teeth on it to match the teeth on this cylinder that moves up and down. And what it does, it locks this piston from going down and only goes up as the engine wears out and the chain gets a little bit looser. This will keep the chain tight and it would take up the slack automatically. So to push it down, we have to move this little block that holds this piston from going down. So what I do is I grab just a flat screwdriver and I put it down right there, if you could see it. And I kind of jam it in there, and as you can see right there, if I can focus on it, see how that block just moved out of the way? Now you can just push on this guide and you see it moving down. And as it moves down, you push it down and then you slide. I grinded this pin down to fit. You can use a small Allen wrench or anything like that. A paper clip might not be strong enough. You can use a channel locks and put it between here, or I usually put it between here and here and squeeze if you have a big enough channel locks, if you have a hard time pushing it with your hand. Of course, it's a lot easier doing it with two hands. And then I push this pin in place. Once you squeeze this, there's a hole that lines up in the piston in this hole, and once you slide this pin in, it just locks it in place, and now you have a slack in the chain. Now you can remove your screwdriver and this piece will go back in place, and now you don't have to remove this tensioner. Now we're ready to install the locking tool to lock these two cams together and remove these two bolts. So this is the tool that we're going to use to hold the cam gears in place while we break these bolts loose. You see there's lands and grooves. You have to line up in these grooves, and these pins somewhat like you got to slide in these holes. So what I usually do, never tried to do this in one hand, but usually I line up the first piece and then I try to hold the first piece in place and spin the second one until it lines up, and it should line up at some point as you're spinning it. You just got to find that sweet spot. It's going to line up both sides at the same time. It's kind of hard to see really what I see, but if it doesn't line up, that means you got to take this other side and turn it one way or another to get it to the next step. So I'm going to turn it down this way and try it like that. Let's see if that would work. There we go. So what I did, I had this lined up more like straight in the middle, and this did not fit either way, whichever way I move it. So I took this out, I turned it one notch down, slid it back in, then after turning this I was able to get it in. So then we gotta tie in this bolt, I believe it's a 15 millimeter, and then we have to use this tool. This is I'm not sure really what size. I believe it's a T50 if I'm not mistaken. It's going to slide in here to break the bolts loose. So what this tool does, it just holds these two cams together, it locks them, so when you break the bolts loose, it doesn't spin the cam. Okay, so I broke these two bolts loose. I removed the tool. Now these two bolts are loose. As a reminder, the torque specs are different for these two pulleys. The camshaft, you just torque it 110 newton meters and you're done. The exhaust, you have to torque it 75 newton meters the first stage, and the second stage would be 90 degrees. So this bolt for the exhaust side is useless. Any angle torque bolt should be replaced. So you can use this bolt on the exhaust and do 75 newton meters and then 90 degrees, and you can get one new bolt, or you can just get two new bolts. I usually just replace both bolts. I have seen people using both, taking the exhaust, puts it on the cam, and takes the cam, put it on the exhaust. I don't like to do that because I don't know who else has been there. Someone might have already been in there and done that already. Not worth taking a chance. After removing the two bolts, you can then slide pulleys off. First one, and I take the exhaust off. Now, as far as marking the chain, there's only one thing I worry about: which side goes out to the outside and which side goes onto the inside. So you can take one of these links and mark it so you know this faces outside. I won't worry about which link matches what. I just make sure I don't flip it upside down when I reinstall it. Then you get the chain off. There's a little bit of tricky part. I leave this part kind of in a little bit until I get the bottom side out, and the chain just comes right off. Now, this engine is no good, so I'm not going to be reusing anything. I will be putting them back on to show you how to do the timing, but I will not be reusing any of these parts. So once we have the cams off, the chain is off, now the only thing we got to do to remove the inner cover is to remove this bolt and this bolt. That's only two bolts that are holding this cover in place right now, and the seals that's around the pipes. So I'm going to remove these two bolts, and then I'll show you how to take this cover off. Okay, so I removed this bolt. This is the longer bolt, goes on top. See, it's got longer distance to reach the threads, so it's the longer bolt, and you got the shorter bolt. What I usually do is I grab my rubber mallet and I tap gently on this side until the cover comes loose. See that? Then what I do, usually, I pull on this side gently, not too much, and I create this little bit of wiggle room, and I just keep moving it up and down, side to side. And what you're trying to do is to release, there's an O-ring in this pipe. It slides onto this water pump housing. You're just trying to get the O-ring slide out, or the pump housing to slide out of the pipe where the O-ring is on. So if you take your time and work at it, side to side, up and down, it will eventually come off. Of course, it's a little bit easier when you have both your hands free. And here it goes. And this is how you remove your inner timing cover.